Hello and welcome to the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast with me, Karen Maloney. I am your host, and the intention of this podcast is to help us open our minds, get curious about ourselves, and to raise our vibration and consciousness levels. Through these conversations, we hope that you will go on an inward journey to discover the truth of who you are and to become aware of your own energy and vibration. We have the power to consciously create our lives, but we need to wake up to this fact before we can begin the process and learn the key of self-responsibility. Check out the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Acast, Castbox, or whatever platform you listen on, and please like, subscribe, and share the podcast. Leave a review, leave a rating, as this will help it to reach more people. Check out my website as well, Soul Power Light, www.soulpowerlight.com. Hello, beautiful people. Thank you for joining me once again. It is me, Karen Maloney, and this is another episode of the Curiosity and Consciousness podcast. Thanks, as always, to everyone who tunes in, who takes the time to share, and also who takes the time to leave a rating on Apple Podcasts. I really appreciate it, and that is the way that it can help reach other people. So thank you, and please continue to like and rate and share. Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to remind you for a last time that my 5-week online group workshop is starting now next week. So this is the last call for anyone who wishes to join. It's called Realign and Expand, and it's for women who want to reevaluate their priorities, to build more self-confidence, to reconnect to their own inner personal truth and start creating steps to move towards their dreams or those desires that they want. So check it out on my website, soulpowerlight.com. Click the online workshops section and you can book in your free 30-minute call as well to see if this is a right fit for you. Really looking forward to connecting with you all. So then back to today's guest, and I have the amazing Barbara Mutedzi joining me, and Barbara is a conscious leadership coach trained in neuroscience-based coaching and with a background in psychology and medical anthropology. Neuroscience-based coaching is the use of knowledge on the mind and brain for higher performance. Barbara is a transformational speaker, published author and writer. Her first book, called Am I Insane, Black or Just a Woman, speaks of her experiences as a young person transitioning through the insanity of everyday living, racism, and growing up female in a largely patriotic society. Barbara's life purpose is to help people harness and control the power they already have within themselves to live their life purpose. Connecting with Barbara was such a pleasure, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. There are so many nuggets throughout this conversation that people can take from. Barbara explains mindset coaching, neuroscience, but also life purpose and how we can break that down and make it really understandable for all of us and how we can all begin to follow our life purpose. She also talks about connecting to our intuition, our own inner knowing, how we can better face fear. She also shared lots about her upbringing and some of the difficulties and challenges that she went through from a very young age that forced her into adulthood, even though she was just a child. But also she explains how that benefited her and helped her really in the work that she's doing today. So a really fascinating conversation, and it's a must that everyone listens to the end to hear Barbara's talk on what's currently happening in relation to Black Lives Matter and how for her it's an issue of equity versus equality. It's a really beautiful kind of monologue that she enters into, and she speaks so eloquently. I think everyone will get something from it and be really inspired by her topics and her themes and her way of explaining things. So check it out and check out more on Barbara's work on her website, designyourlifefoundation.com. But as always, I will have everything linked on my website, soulpowerlight.com, and click the podcast section for links to all Barbara's work across all social medias. Welcome, Barbara Mutedzi. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you, first of all.
No worries. Thank you so much for inviting me and for this chat. I am looking forward to learning and to sharing and to also hearing a bit of your story and how we can help other people open up their minds, get curious about themselves, and to realize the power and potential that we all hold within.
Brilliant. Yes, learning and sharing, that is key and so powerful. So you are a conscious leadership coach and lots of other things as well, an author, but maybe tell us a little bit first about your work and what attracted you to your line of work.
So as a conscious leadership coach, it didn't really start from there. It started off from being a life coach. And what I found is with life coaching, I would get my clients to a certain space or a plateau, and we would never sort of progress from that. So we would put together brilliant plans and goal setting and all of that on paper. But in terms of actually having the work and putting in the work and actually achieving the goals, we would never sort of get 100% there. And that did not reflect well within myself. And so I felt that there had to be more. Mm-hmm. So what I then did was studied mindset coaching and high performance coaching. I've always been a high performer in terms of increasing or finding ways to increase work output. So I read a little bit more around that to see how I can help both myself and my clients. And what I realized was, as much as you might have great plans around what you want to do with your life or different areas of your life, if your mind is not in the right space, it's difficult to sustain habits and behaviors. So from that, I also then delved into neuroscience-based coaching, because neuroscience-based coaching is study of the mind and the brain and how you can harness those for higher performance. So for me, coaching is all about asking questions, trying different things out, assessing habits, and also just figuring out how we can move faster toward our goals, as well as assessing any blockages that are there so that we can also address them.
Powerful. Love it. And yes, I completely agree. Mindset is absolutely everything. Everything is a state of mind. And when we can get our mind and our brain working together, magic can really happen. So tell us, explain a little bit more how that process can start for people. How can people begin to use their mind and brain for higher performance?
So if we can think of one of the examples I use, well, two examples I use. The first one is if you think about a computer and a printer. So when you type something into your computer, then you press the print button, your printer then prints out whatever it is that you have typed in. So when you think about the mind, the brain, and behavior, the mind are your fingertips. They are typing in things that your computer then takes in, which is your brain. So whatever you think, your brain latches onto that, produces hormones and chemicals that then affect your behavior. So your brain is your computer, and then your behavior is your printer. So whatever you're thinking, whatever you define yourself is, or any situation, what happens is your brain actually takes that in. And depending on whatever it is that you filled your mind with, it then produces chemicals and hormones that then affect the behavior. The second example that might help is, for example, let's say you've bought a new dress or a new suit, and it fits very well and you're very confident. You tell yourself, today I'm feeling great, I'm looking great. Even the way that you walk is different. And because of you've told yourself I'm feeling great today, your brain, again, your computer, latches onto those words, produces good feel hormones that then even change the way that you walk and step into a room, because you're feeling confident and you've told yourself that. So that's why mindset is so important, because it guides and it affects everything that we do and how we behave in the end. So it's so, so powerful, when we talk about self-talk And even the people we expose ourselves to and what they're talking about, that affects what goes into our mind and our brain. And other things that we can think about is what we read, what we expose ourselves to in terms of media, and all of that. So when we take that in, it literally affects what is produced in our brain and then affects our behavior. So we do need to guard our mindset. And the best way to do that from a coaching perspective is actually to understand, what your life purpose is. And maybe that may be too big an ask. So it's about understanding what are the things you want out of the different areas of your life, and to be able to get those things, what sort of behaviors do you need, and what sort of information can you relegate or read or expose yourself to? What sort of people who talk about that information can you surround yourself with? Because that information is put into your brain and then affects the behavior. So you want to be around people and media and information that is aligned to the behavior that you want and the goals that you set in your life.
Yeah, I love everything that you said there. And I think, it is making that bigger, that conscious connection, because, this is not what we've been taught. We haven't been taught we have this kind of power, or the power that our thoughts actually hold, and how everything we're thinking, whether positive or negative, has a physiological, a biological, a chemical effect on our body that, then reproduces and, can affect not only us and others. And, I suppose it comes down to as well, I love quantum physics, and it's essentially kind of boiling down to quantum physics as well, that we are the creators. But again, this is a very new science. Like quantum physics, in the last 20 years has really started to delve into this more, and, the energy and the frequency and the vibration that our thoughts and mindset carry. So I love everything that you've said as well. And, life purpose, that is such a big word as well. And it's so true. But I think for a lot of people, it is... Or how can you help people to realize that every single person is born with a purpose? Because often it can be this really elusive thing that, we struggle to know and feel like, well, I don't have a purpose, I'm just kind of here. So how can you, again, help people to make that conscious connection and realize their value and worth?
So the first thing I would say is, don't be afraid of the term life purpose, because it's easy to be afraid of something we don't understand. I get that. But because we're having this conversation, and you've been having this sort of conversation yourself around just being conscious and all of that, this is the type of information that helps us break down the things that we are afraid of. Because when we think about fear, it's really just we don't have enough information perhaps. And so, these podcasts and platforms of different types of conversations are an example of the medium that we can start engaging with. And I love your question, because let's break down life purpose. Let's try and understand it from... So one of the statements I always say is that we are all spiritual beings who are living a human life. And as spiritual beings, we are all interconnected. But then the cloak that we have put on ourselves as human beings has now masked that. And what I mean is, as human beings, we are told, well, if you're a white person or a black person or a man or a woman or a married person or single person, whatever title that we've put on each other, that unfortunately has separated people and has masked the interconnectedness that we are in. And to break that even further, when we say that we're spiritual beings, it's not talking about religion, but if you think about it, there is a higher power, and we choose, anyone depending on religion can choose to call it whether God or Allah, or whether you follow Buddha or any of the different religions. But the bottom line is that there is a higher power that we are all connected to. And we could even call this higher power your spirit or your soul. So when I try and break down life purpose, what I say is, let's remove the two words life purpose. What you need to do, or what has helped most people, I've helped figure out the life purpose, is follow the things that bring you joy. So whatever brings you joy when you're exercising, whatever brings you joy in terms of food, whatever brings you joy in the people that you hang around with, whatever brings you joy in the type of work you want to engage in, whatever brings you joy in the spaces you want to be involved in, whether creatively or work or anything, follow those things or do those things more. That's one part. The second part is if there's something that you're curious about, that's another thing to follow. So if you think, this looks, interesting, I'm quite curious, I want to go find out more information, then go do some research on all of this. So the importance of following the things that bring you joy and following the things that you're curious about, I call all of these little breadcrumbs that your soul or your spirit or that inner power within you is leaving along your life path toward your purpose. Because all of these things that make you happy and increase your vibration and make you joyful, that is your soul and your spirit, your inner being. All of that is guiding you to what it is that you are already. So you might not know what your life purpose is, but when you do all these activities around you, that leads you to something. So those are the two ways that people can start doing. Do the things that bring you joy, give them more time and enjoy them as much as you can. Whatever you're curious about, go for that, because all of those are linking you towards your life purpose. Other ways as well to think about is, when we talk about intuition and your gut, all of those are little nudges, right? That your spirit is saying, hey, there's something there, or hey, don't go down that path, or whatever it is. So be curious, because your spirit knows why you're here. And unfortunately, it's not something we're taught in school. So, we only usually explore these things, most people during a crisis. And that sort of are, stop and start to really think about why we're here on this planet, or, how is my life being meaningful, which are all great questions, which would be lovely if we could do them or ask them earlier in life. But unfortunately, it's during crisis that a lot of people ask those questions.
Yeah, so true. And, that's the intention as well with having these conversations and putting this information out there as well, because, yes, it happened for me as well, kind of in a crisis. I was always interested in it and totally fascinated and had read all the books and got it cognitively, but I was not living it. So it was, that crisis moment that actually made me start walking my talk, and everything has shifted. But also I completely understand, it is that easy, as in follow our joy, do what lights us up. But I know from experience as well, again, it's the way that we're taught from the outside in, and, who we're meant to be, and we're told who we should be and who we're expected to be, that we can get clouded. And I know, going back many years, when I started to ask these questions, who am I? What does light me up? What do I want? I ran from those questions because I actually didn't know. It was like, not that I didn't know, but I wasn't willing to put in the time and to take the responsibility to, peel back the layers and to uncover those answers within myself again. And I think that's important for everyone to know as well, that it's not difficult, but it does take a bit of work. As in, we have to, get quiet or explore, and like you said as well, be curious and allow ourselves to be led and kind of move back from maybe how we've always been, and releasing that a little. So I love everything that you mentioned there as well. And from working with clients as well, how do you find, because kind of releasing control and our fixed linear sense of how my life should be and how it's meant to be, and this is my plan and this is the only plan, which can keep us stuck. How can you help, clients to kind of expand on that and get a much bigger perspective, and, and like you say, connecting to that spirit aspect of ourselves?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And you're so right. It's not easy from the beginning. I mean, it's easy for us to talk about it, and it's easy.
It gets easier. But I always say as well, it's kind of a fake fear, because yes, it seems scary because we're stepping into the unknown. We're stepping into a new way of being, a new version of ourselves, or a new way of thinking. So our mind tells us it's scary. That's just the way we're programmed. Our mind is wired to keep us in the familiar. But that actually doesn't mean it's scary. And we only know that through pushing through those resistances and exploring anyway, taking the small steps. And then it's like, oh, yeah, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. And you keep going and going and growing.
Yeah, no, you're so right. Fear is only because it's an unknown space. And if we could break down the word fear, when you look at it, FEAR means, it can mean different things as an acronym. It could mean false evidence appearing real, because we keep thinking, well, there's something wrong there, or we're afraid because we don't have enough information. And we keep saying that over and over again. Our brain actually thinks, oh, okay, we are afraid. So you're providing yourself with false evidence because you've actually not done anything. And then it starts appearing real because you've been doing it and saying it over and over again.
Yeah.
But another way of looking at FEAR is saying that I am, when it's about facing everything and rising.
Yeah.
So this is a new space and I want to face this thing, and maybe I can face it 100% head on, or maybe today I'll do 10%, tomorrow I'll do another 10% and build up on it. But the thing is, it's about gaining momentum. So yes, in the beginning, it's going to be difficult, but you can gain momentum. And when we talk about the mind-body connection, the other acronym, which I'll explain after I've given this explanation, is with FEAR, when you're really excited and happy about something and you're really joyful and you're jumping up and down, your heart beats very fast, right? And it's the same thing when you're afraid of something. For example, if you're watching a movie and they have those sounds in the background that, something horrific is going to happen, your heart also beats quite fast because you're afraid. So your heart does not know whether it's fear or excitement. It just beats fast because it's in that fight or flight mode. But at conscious level, you get to define what that beating of the heart means. So if you're afraid of something or excited about something, you at conscious level can say, oh, okay, I am going to face everything and rise. Instead of me being afraid, I'm going to feel excited and ready for whatever is going to come to me. So there are different ways you can sort of link your mind and your brain. And this is where we talk about the conscious and subconscious. Your brain has been programmed to look after your body. So it does not want you to go into spaces that you don't know, because you don't know whether there's going to be a lion behind the bush, right? So it protects you. And then it releases, stress hormones, cortisol, that then are, stop your body from going into spaces that are unknown. It also prepares you to fight or flight. But when you tell yourself, okay, my heart is beating very fast, this is an unknown space, but instead of feeling upset or unhappy or providing false evidence, I'm going to choose consciously to say that I'm feeling excited and I'm ready for whatever it is that's coming, that is new, that will enhance my life. So those are different ways you can sort of work with defining and becoming more conscious of what your life can become.
Absolutely. And that's it essentially in a nutshell. It is becoming a conscious and aware. Well, for me anyway, in the way I work and the way I live my life, it is becoming that conscious and aware and curious. And like you said there as well, meaning is completely and utterly subjective. And like you mentioned there as well, we have the power to consciously choose and change how we associate with that feeling. And I know that's something, again, it requires just that kind of curious mind. And I know from a young age, it was something I always kind of questioned, some of the status quo and the bigger things that were just expected of me, that I was like, how does this make sense? And I used to talk to my parents and be like, why am I expected to do this? Who says this is how I need to live my life, and do X, Y, and Z, and this is the only way? And it really did confuse me. I did it. I wasn't rebellious, but I really had this sense of, disconnection within. And then I learned the magic of, it's meaning. And that's how I approach my life as well. I consider myself like a scientist. I'm my own experiment, and life is my lab. And I will go and explore and create for ourselves. And even there was a study done a couple of years, 10 years ago or more, I can't remember, but there was a TED talk as well. I can't remember her name. I think it was McGonigal. It was something McGonigal. And it was about that as well, and stress. And with two groups, and how we identify and what meaning we create around stress. Because like you're talking about, the heart there as well, stress, when we feel excited, it feels the exact same as stress in our body. It's that jittery and the increase in the heart rate. And again, it's how we direct it. And there was two groups of people, And one group was told that, the usual stress is really bad, it's a killer, and, you'll increase your risk of heart disease and all these kind of things. And the other group was told that, no, stress is good. When you feel this, it's an excitement. It's an invitation to move towards something that you want, to create something you want, to put that energy to, something positive and something that will uplift you. And then after, I think it was done over about 8 or 10 years. And after that time, the people who were told that stress was bad, so many had increased risk of heart rate, many had passed away, whereas the group where they were told it was a good thing, none of them were more at risk than the average person. So this is the power that we hold. Like this is it. This is the crux of it all. And I love this conversation as well, and that you're so into the science of it as well, because sometimes people just often think it's airy fairy and woo woo, and it's, great thinking to think positive and just, float on that boat, but it's actually extremely scientific. And neuroplasticity, we have the ability to change and rewire our brain. It is not fixed like once thought. So I love this, and I'm curious to know a little bit about your background as well, and how, what led you to this work, because you're from Zimbabwe. So what were your experiences that helped you make this more conscious connection?
Long story.
Well, you could do the highlights.
But if I could just comment or add on to what you just said as well, I'll dive into my story as well. I love the word that you've used to say, when we are feeling stressed, it's really an invitation. I love that word. And I would love to stress on it that, when you're feeling afraid, it's an invitation to a new way of doing things. I just love that.
Yeah.
And, the whole thing about neuroplasticity, there's that statement that says you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And that's obviously a lie, because our brain are plastic, and, you can change the way that your brain is wired by trying out different habits that will work toward where you need to go. So I really love that word. Thank you for saying it. I love it.
Yeah, it is. Everything is an invitation, like anytime. And I welcome it now, even myself, if I feel confused or awkward or uncomfortable. Initially I feel them and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to feel this way. But then I catch myself and again, I remind myself, oh, I know how this goes. This is an invitation. There's something new trying to connect for me. So I just need to I need to, follow those nudges, the intuition like you spoke about, and see what shows up.
Yeah, no, it's really important. And for me, because of the way that I grew up and how I then later on learned to embrace my curiosities. So a bit of my background, my biological dad died when I was 5 or 6. I don't remember when. And so I don't remember him, and I don't remember being a child with him around. And then my mom, what happened was his family wanted my mom to be remarried into their family by his brother, who was already married. It was the tradition in those days. And she refused, and so they disowned us. So I don't know my side of the family, or I grew up not knowing my side of my father's family, which didn't faze me because I don't remember him. Yeah. And then my own mom died from HIV/AIDS probably when I think I was 16. I was 16 and a half. She passed on from there. But before she passed on, she had my younger brother, who's 9 years younger than I am, with another guy. So they got married. But then his family didn't like the fact that he was much younger than my mom. So that marriage didn't work out. So my mom raised myself and my young brother as a single mother. And that was really, I only appreciate the difficulty of it now. I didn't understand it, obviously, when I was young. Yeah. So when she died, I was 16, my brother was 7. And I had to now look after my brother from such a young age. And I grew up with such a lot of anger and pain, and I felt abandoned by her. Obviously, as a child, you don't really understand death. Yeah. I felt like she left us, and, she didn't try hard enough to stick around and get well. And in those days, HIV medication was, I don't know whether it was just hard to get or it wasn't there, but there was still a lot of stigma around it and, around the disease. And it's still there, but it was worse then. I think she died in 97, so it was quite bad then. And so a lot of things happened around that time that I, as a child who was forced into adulthood, had to face. So I grew up with very upset and very angry, and not having an outlet to let it out. And because I'm a 90% introvert, I actually did not know how to even talk about these things, because no, you in most cultures you're seen, as a child you're seen, but you should not sort of speak up and things like that. And so for me growing up, I had to now look for a maid, stay in our house, get my brother to school, get myself to finish my 2 years of high school as well. And as soon as I did that, then I had to look for a job and literally raise my brother for the next couple of years. And from that, there was no space or a transition space where I had an adult who would guide me. So the discussions whenever, let's sit down and do a budget. Let's sit down and how are you feeling? How can we support you? It wasn't there. And because I was so confused in my mind as well, because now I had this adult role, but I was in a child's body, and my mind was sort of in transition. When you're a teenager, you're sort of trying to figure out where you fit in.
Yeah, so it's hard enough.
I could go on and on and on. And what I'm finding is because I had to mature earlier than my peers, a lot of my peers would come to me for advice around different things as I was growing up and becoming more mature myself. Because again, they saw me as this responsible person, not knowing that I myself was also going through a number of things. But obviously, having to run a household, you learn how to sort of run your life a little better than a regular 16-year-old who's, still living with their parents and things like that. So from that young age, a lot of my peers started coming to me to ask, different advice, whether it was, budgeting and all of that stuff, because I was managing that quite well. And even through high school, I was a prefect. And so I always had those leadership positions because of what had happened in my life, which was a great positive that came out of that I was thrown into these leadership positions and I could step into them without any challenges because of that. And so with the life coaching, it sort of was something I was already doing as I was growing up. And with time, I sort of went online to figure out, well, I actually enjoy, talking to other people, understanding how their lives are going. Because for me, I think it was also an outlet to say, well, I've got other people to talk to and to understand what's going on in their lives. And it made me so comfortable and I enjoyed it even more. So with time, I went online and researched around, I didn't know the term life coach, but I bumped into it somehow when I was doing my searching. And that's where, when you're curious about something, when you go online or find information and things like that, it will come to you. So I bumped into life coaching. I thought, let me do an online, certification and see how this goes. And then I realized that the content that they had in the program was exactly what I was doing when I was teaching other people. And so it started from there. But the big highlight, and this has happened probably in the past 2-3 years, is all those hurt feelings, all that feeling of abandonment, all that feeling of being a people pleaser because I didn't want to be abandoned by other adults and all of that was still with me. And it's only in the past 2-3 years that because I could see that I'm doing very well and I bring high quality work in all the environments I've worked in. My background is in medical anthropology, so I'm a researcher. So I did a lot of research, a lot of programming, and I was doing very well, all quality work, being praised and everything like that. But I'd always get to a space where I'd cut myself short, whether it's negotiating contracts, whether it's applying for bigger posts that I knew that I was overqualified for. But I would always go for smaller things. It was always because I wanted to stay in line so that I would not be rejected because I had been abandoned from a young age. And I can tell you now this confidently. Then I didn't know because it was frustrating.
Yeah, well, this is it. And like you said, well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And what an inspiration. That is incredible and not... Well, maybe in your part of the world, maybe it's a more common story, but certainly, where I'm from, it's not. So that is huge. And that was a question I wanted to ask you as well, because obviously when we have these traumas from a young age, they stay with us. We need to look at these wounds. And like you say, when they're unhealed, they can keep showing up in different ways. And like you mentioned, cutting yourself short, that kind of self-sabotage, keeping yourself small out of fear of being abandoned again. And that's all like makes perfect sense. And again, that's the way we're wired to protect ourselves. So I'm curious as well to know, how did you start that healing process of those old wounds and integrating so they could become your wisdom?
It wasn't easy. It started off with a lot of self-bashing, to be honest, because I started comparing myself to other people who were doing much, much better than I was, with much, much less in terms of intellect and all of that. And first of all, no one should be comparing with anyone. You should never compare yourself to another person. Because the beautiful thing of being a human being is that we're all different and we bring different light to the table. And I understand that now.
Absolutely.
But that's where I started. I was comparing myself with people who were the same age as I was, but had done so much more spectacular things. And then I would look and say, but I do that stuff. And I even bring even more stuff, that I've learned. But what is it about me that's not letting me get to the stage I know I should be and even beyond? So I got frustrated. And again, it goes back to things that you're curious about. So these are not bad questions. In the beginning, they were, because I was bashing myself, saying, well, there's something wrong with me. There's really something, like, what is wrong with me? And not saying, hey, there might be something there. Let's explore that a bit more. So I'm definitely much gentler with myself to say, okay, this does not feel all right, or this does not look okay. There's a sign there. So let's sit with that. So I'm big on mindful meditation. That's my spiritual practice. And it goes down to, one day I sat down, and I've been studying and reading a lot around Jungian psychology, which talks about, the deep inner work, because I was now curious to say, what is going on in my psyche? I've got a background in psychology, yes, but it was at undergrad level, so we didn't really go in depth. And I've always been excited about psychology. So I thought, let me just go a bit more in depth and work on myself and see what's going on. And one of the questions I asked is, when was the first time I felt abandoned? And, the most interesting thing came up. It wasn't when my mother died, because all along I thought it was because my mother died, but it was actually much earlier than that. And I thought, oh my goodness, so this thing has been with me, and I think the last time was probably like almost 30 years ago. So I've been carrying this with me for 3 decades. And it was a simple thing that happened on the playground in primary school, where I was a child who was coming from a poor neighborhood, and I was going to a school which was in a rich neighborhood. And so most of the kids had a lot of resources, and no one wanted to really hang out with me because I was this poor kid. So I always felt like I never belonged. And so I had to do the right thing, in quotes, to make sure that people loved me. So I always felt left out. And then I sat down and thought, wow, that must have felt really not so great for my 11-year-old self. So there's an exercise that is called sitting down with your inner child. So I literally sat down on my pillow, and I imagined myself at 11 years old on my playground, and I sat myself down and said, how are you feeling? I am the adult Barbara. Let's have a conversation. And all these emotions just welled up from my chest. I feel unloved. I feel unseen. I feel unheard. I've tried, to be around people, to be a good girl, to do all these things, but still it feels like there's something wrong with me, and no one is sitting down to listen to me, because everyone is treating me like an egg when I'm at school, because they don't understand this poor kid. And then because I've got a single mother, she's hardly around, no one is speaking to me because she's rightfully at work. So it's all those things that came up because I gave it time to sit down and say, there's something happening here, and I don't like it because it's holding me back. I know I can do better. Let's sit down and understand where it stemmed from, and to just start thinking backwards to saying, okay, when was the first time you felt like this? What other occasions, did you feel like this? And once I did that, because there are always two sides to the story, I then thought, at 11 years old, yes, I was going through all this emotionally, but I was on the tennis team, I was on the swimming team, I was on, cross-country running, I was doing so many things and doing so well and getting all these awards at 11 years old, even though I was going through all this emotional turmoil in my life. And that, believe it or not, gave me even more strength to say, if at 11 I could achieve all of that stuff, even with all this stuff happening, then by God, I can, achieve even more at this age. So I actually started laughing, sitting down there. Thank you so much for allowing me to sit down with you, my younger Barbara. And I am here to hear all your traumas so that we can start moving forward, understanding where we are coming from. I'm going to hold your hand and be so grateful for even pulling through with all those accomplishments at 11. And I've got more resources now for us to move forward with all the positives. And that, it was like putting a weighted bag of stones on the ground because of that appreciation and giving that child now a time to be listened to, because that's all we want. And now I use that, in my coaching. I bring it in with leaders to say, you want to go to a certain space in your leadership journey, what's holding you back? Let's do these exercises. Because once you remove all these perceptions and all these things that hold us back without us consciously understanding or knowing them, we can only get as far. So that was a big space for me.
Oh, so powerful, and such vital work as well. Because I loved you had the insight, or that to ask the question, what is it about me that I'm not reaching these levels of success? Because that is so powerful, because most of us, we stay in victim role and we play, oh, why not me? That's so unfair. Why them? Whereas the truth is, there is absolutely nothing stopping us except ourselves. And that's why, it's the inner work is everything, and especially inner child work, because we all carry something from childhood. Like even just the way we're programmed from age 1 to 7, everything goes straight into our subconscious mind. We don't have that analytical kind of filtering. So we all have things that we pick up from society, from religion, from culture, from parents, from peers, from education. Like that's just a given. But if we don't take the responsibility like you did as well, and to ask those questions and to sit and, create that space to allow and to feel. This is the big thing I discovered as well. We just have to feel. And I know I was terrified to feel for so long, because like that, it didn't make sense. I thought I'd get hurt. So it makes logical sense to keep our walls and our barriers. But like you say, it'll get us so far, and then it'll be our greatest hindrance. But again, it's unconscious until we start to look within, because we will keep looking externally and changing our job, or changing our role, or changing where we live, or changing our house, or changing our relationship, thinking that will solve it, that will solve it, that will solve it. It may work for a while, but it's that deeper inner work, which is so powerful. So thank you for sharing all that as well. Because it really is, like, we are our only limit. And again, it comes back to what you said at the very beginning of the conversation, mindset. It's all in our mind as well, these limits. There are realities. It's not to say that your upbringing and what you went through wasn't painful, wasn't horrific, wasn't tragic. Absolutely, 100% it was. But like you said as well, is this the reality I want to live in forever? Like we say, our past and what happened to us is not our responsibility, or we can't change, but we can change everything about our future. But it takes that work, like you say, that's not easy in the beginning.
It is. And, and as you said as well, it's not easy in the beginning, because for me, there was a lot of crying. One of the questions I ask my clients in the beginning, and they don't like this, is if you were to die today, or not even that, it's who would you like to stand up at your funeral, and what would you ideally like them to say about the life that you would ideally like to be living? And so we delve into that to say, well, whatever you're doing right now, is it the life that you want to live? And if not, what do you need to change? What are the blockages? So we go straight into that to start with death, and then coming to rebirth. And
that's what it's all about, death and rebirth. All the time. Death to our own ego, to our own habits, to old ways, to allow new to rebirth. And that's a powerful question as well, because when we do have mortality by our side, You know, because that's reality. We have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in the next second, never mind in the next 10 years. And that's not to live in fear. That's not scary. That's really empowering to take that juice and go, okay, so what am I going to do with my time here, however long or short this is? Why do I want to live in misery? Why do I want to carry this bag of rocks, like you mentioned as well? You know, because it is my choice to leave it down. But yes, it is scary because still it's familiar to us. It's comfort. And leaving it down means we have to move beyond. We have to allow something new.
Yeah,
that's the magic.
You know, one of the things I am excited about is I'm excited about death.
Yeah.
And when I say that, people just look at me funny. But it's because it's like a guiding torch to say, well, I'm alive now. What can I do? Or why am I not doing the things I'm supposed to be doing? So let's sit down with that and figure that out. And, you know, you mentioned something about we always look for external things to change because things are not happening, whether it's a job or a new relationship or things like that. And one of the most powerful things that happened to me when I was sitting down were two things. The first one is to understand what in psychology is called projection. And the other thing is doing shadow work. And, you know, when you point fingers at something or someone because it's not feeding what you want for your soul, if you really sort of lift up your hand and point a finger, the other three are pointing right back at you.
Yeah.
So it's more we need to do the inner work. And then the outside part is actually a reflection of what's happening inside. So when we are pointing fingers, we might point it outside, but actually most of it is because of what's going inside. And when we talk about, you know, shadow work, this is one of the things that isn't really talked about a lot in sort of Western forms of, actually, no, it is talked about, but not so much in Western forms of leadership coaching, if I can put it that way, where, you know, we have to look at both our good and our not so great parts. When we point fingers at someone who's doing, you know, not so great things in the world, the question is, have you done that before? And do you ever think of doing that thing that person is doing? Because when we point to someone who's, let's say, random example, you know, someone who's murdering another person, which is not a great thing, or someone who's cheating on something or someone, it is easier for us to point fingers at that person. But the question should be, have we cheated ourselves out of something in our lives? Have we murdered some part of ourselves that we're not bringing out to the fore? How am I becoming a better person? So the beauty of becoming interconnected as human beings is what's happening, and what we're seeing as an outside is more just a flashlight to say, hey, there's something within you. So if you're liking something from another person or something that another person is doing, the question should be, I can be like that because I am interconnected to another human being. Is there a part of me that I haven't shone light to that I can use to step up and also shine my light brighter like that next person? So it stops being competition or saying, well, you know, they're lucky, whatever it is. It becomes, oh, that's another human being. They're able to do that. So there must also be something within me that can help me shine my light. On the opposite side, if someone is not doing things that are so great and it affects you, whether emotionally or physically, the question is, what's my part in this? What is it inside me that I'm hiding, that I'm now finding easier to point fingers at another person as opposed to addressing whatever it is that's inside me? So again, this is all the work that we start doing because, you know, we like to gossip and point fingers and, you know, woe be to me and all of that. But at the other side saying, well, I have all these big goals and I want to achieve them, but we're wasting time projecting on the outside and not doing that deep inner work. And it's needed for us to cultivate our consciousness to a higher level. And we have the ability to do that, which is brilliant. Yeah. And so, you know, all this psychological work is quite important for all of us to go through, I feel.
So important. And again, like the reality is, blame is easier. Blame is so much easier. You know, and that is the truth. And I know even for myself, you know, once you start the inward journey and you're like, holy crap, you realize the power you have and how much everything you think, consume, eat, you know, from a book, music, conversations, like you mentioned earlier, has an effect, and it is creating your future. And, you know, then you're like, oh my God, and you get so sacred about your energy, your word, your body, your vessel, your thoughts, because you know the impact. And I know for me as well, the hardest, it's all about getting honest, but the hardest person to get honest with was myself. And I think that's why so many people run, because again, we're taught kind of look externally, or it's someone else's fault, or point the finger. Yes, things happen, but again, we're our own blocks. And I'm like, oh shit, no. I'm like, I kept myself there because out of fear, I was afraid to change, or I was afraid to leave, or I was afraid to, do or speak what I wanted to say or whatever. And you're like, oh man. But yet, that's where so much compassion comes in, because everything was perfect. Everything is exactly as it needed to be for me, for you, for each of us in our lives, because these are all reasons and our skill set then as we move forward and grow and expand and help others, like you say, shine our light. So there's a huge amount of self-compassion. And then the relearning, the rewiring of, like those questions, well, who do I want to be? What does light me up? How do I want to live my life? And staying in our own lane, because then you realize, it's absolutely worthless comparing myself to anyone else, because it comes back to what you said as well, life purpose. We all have a purpose. And yes, they may be similar, loads of people's purposes, but the way I bring my light, the way you bring your light, the way someone else brings their light is the unique part. And that's the magic. Like, there is no such thing as competition at the end of the day, because collaboration is the way, because what is rightly yours cannot be taken from us, and that's the magic. And there's so many questions I still want to ask, but time is running out. But I'm curious to know, like, when you look back on everything in your life and that, but how do you look in it all? Do you look in it with gratitude? Or there's still little bits where you're like, that was really shit, and want to hold on to victim? Or
I definitely don't want to hold on to victimhood. It's too expensive for me. The bag is too heavy. So I'm constantly always looking for more bags to find out if they're still there, because I want to empty them. Because
that's so true.
So much life is so much easier. Your mind just sort of lets go of things that I can't control, and it's okay. And when you do all this inner child work, you're not only looking at the negative, because what comes out of it, like what I explained when I sat down with my 11-year-old was, oh my goodness, I managed to achieve all these things, even though with all this crap that was going on in my mind. So I'm actually much stronger than I, believe to be right now as an adult, with more resources and more access to different things. So that even gives me more strength to move forward. So no, I don't want to hold on to any baggage. I literally, sit down once in a while and say, okay, what went right this week and what didn't go so well, and where do we need to do some more work and all of that. I'm excited about that now, because I've got more momentum, and the more I'm seeing results in my clients as well, that again just helps me keep moving forward, because my life purpose is to help other people harness and control the power they already have within themselves to live their own life purpose. So the more free, the more joyful that I am, the more I can feed into that, which is totally awesome, because everyone wins. And, I love the statement you talked about self-compassion, which is so big. I have been so harsh to myself in my mind, over little things. If I fail to, put fuel in my car, I'm shouting at myself in my mind. And it's like, no, now I really understand what self-love is, because that's what it is. The words you put in your mind affect the hormones and the chemicals in your body and affect your behavior and your whole day. So I never have bad days. I might have bad moments, and that's okay. Lasts for 2 minutes, then we move on.
Absolutely.
So life becomes easier. And, with all this conscious leadership, it all comes down to say, when you as a leader, whether you're leading your own life, or you're leading a team of people, or your family, or a community, or a nation, when you go through all this healing, you become more compassionate, first of all to yourself, and then to other people, because you actually understand people a bit more because of all the traumas that all of us have gone through since childhood. And so it becomes easier to bring people to the table to say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. What makes you happier? What do you need? How can I as a leader help you to shine, to make your light shine brighter? What skill sets do you need? What conversations do you need? What is happening in your space? So you'll find that, you're actually now collaborating even more. And the more you collaborate, the higher the performance, the higher the impact. And the more sustainable is your business or your home or your nation or your community, because everyone is now collaborating. And as human beings, we are all built for love and collaboration and working together. And it all stems from being compassionate to ourselves first. We get to understand how that feels when we go through that journey. And then we also allow safe environments for other people to walk through that same journey from a space of love and just acceptance. And again, like what you said, it removes the whole notion of competition because we all have something to bring to the table.
Amen to all of that. Like, yes, that was so beautiful. Thank you. But yes, absolutely, 100%, totally agree. And like you say, once you start removing those layers and feeling that lightness, it is that, oh my God, what else can I do? Because it's this inner freedom and lightness that is everything, that just sparks exactly what you said, that compassion for yourself, for others, the love, the collaboration, the joy, the appreciation of being alive and having life. Like, that is the greatest gift at the end of the day. We have life. Nothing else can compare. But it takes an experience and a knowing and doing the work to come to that realization. Cognitively, you're like, yeah, whatever. What is she on about? But it's the experience, the feeling, the knowing. But as well, before we wrap up, obviously, with all that's going on in the world right now, obviously 2020 has been a huge year of transitions and shakeups and challenges and difficulties and pausing and, space. And obviously with all the Black Lives Matters and this conversation that's happening as well, I'd love to know, how you view it all, and as your vision for the future as well, and because again, like you mentioned earlier, we have to feel and we have to see what is unconscious, and we've all had it on our periphery, but the Western world, white supremacy, we've been totally unconscious to it. So I do believe it is the collective unconscious coming up to be cleansed and purged. It's the only way. It is that death and rebirth. So I'd love to hear, but obviously I'm totally removed from it, because I have this white privilege. So who am I to say anything? So I would love to hear you speak on it as well.
Yeah. For me, it really is compassion, to be honest. Compassion comes from really listening to each other, because, we talk to each other, but we don't actually listen to each other. And I feel like all these fires that are coming up have always been there, slowly and quietly. But we've come to a stage where people are tired of just not being heard. And so it's not just sit down and hear me, it's change systems, change processes. I am now, showing you what works and what doesn't. And obviously I don't support violence and all of that, because it does not come from a place of compassion. Because first of all, we're not being compassionate with ourselves and our environment. And then we're not being compassionate to the next person. And I understand from a non-conscious space that it does feel like we've been bashing against windows and doors all the time. And so now we just want to, be violent. But it never leads us to a great path. And I'm saying this from a person who's never liked violence. So there could be another view, I don't know. But I know that doesn't work. So the first stage is to not only listen, but to actually do something actively towards that brings communities together. And that boils down to be more conscious to what other people are going through or experiencing. And even though we might not be in their shoes, because there's no way we can ever live another person's life through their own shoes, it's about understanding, giving them the platform, and then doing something about it and believing them when they're saying it. Because belief is a choice. So I'll give an example. If someone says, well, I grew up in the Christian family, so I believe in God. And someone says, well, I grew up and I believe in Muslim. That's what they believe. And that's what they've been exposed to. But when they grow up and go into their own household, they might choose not to believe in any of that. So belief is a choice. So we should never just say, well, I'm going to believe this part of this person, or I'm going to just take this bit and work with that. It's no, you need to speak to the whole person, because we're all interconnected. And I'm not saying that we should make things easier for different people because of their color or age or gender or things like that. What I'm saying is we've misconstrued or misunderstood the words quality and equity. So what Black people in general, or people of other races besides white, are looking at is actually equity, to say we want the same opportunities. We don't want you to make it easier for us, but we want the same opportunities. It's like with males and females in the workplace. If we have the qualifications, then give us the jobs. Don't scratch us out from it. I'm not saying I'm equal to, a white man. I'm not, but it should be equity in terms of offer the job, and if I'm qualified, let me at least apply for it, and then don't discriminate me against that. So equity is important. We've lost the plot as, the whole world around that, and when we do, with those two words, equality and equity, we've lost the plot on those. So it's more about equity as opposed to equality. But then when people are fighting, they lean more on the word equality, and then we lose the plot around equity, because equity leans on more the systems and the processes. Because once you change systems and processes, then it becomes easier to manage behavior and to allow everyone, to the table. And that's what it is. So we need to be more compassionate to each other.
Yes, thank you for sharing that as well. And I totally agree. And I think more than ever now as well, it's showing, because again, like you say, nothing exists, or even like you're talking about beliefs. When we think back, and I think back, I'm like, any single child, baby born, brought into this earth is a complete and utter ball of pure consciousness and high vibrational energy and unconditional love. They are complete and utter blank canvas, and everything outside of that then is a learnt behavior. So it's now like our whole conversation, it is for all of us, and especially white people, to do the inner work as well, and to ask these questions, because why are we just being spoon-fed and not being afraid to question, just because something has always been a certain way? It's waking up for ourselves, making our own choices as well, and be like, hang on a second. And, exposing ourselves, not being afraid to go beyond our comfort zone. And like you say, sit down with the person, listen, have a conversation. Because even when I've traveled all over the world to all continents, I'm like, wow, from a young age, that opened my mind going, we're all the same. We are all human. So I'm like, I don't understand. But again, it's all just constructs. It's all constructs. And this is the shift we're in as well. And we're moving to the new earth, that these are the things, the paradigms that are crumbling. And, it does come back to the inner work and the blocks and the resistances and the fears we hold within ourselves in the first place, to look at those and get curious about those as well, to take those down, to then allow this bigger conversation and community and oneness and collaboration to rise again. Because, they're the shifts we're going through as well. I believe. Anyway, that's my experience and my story at the moment anyway. So I don't know if there's anything you feel called to share before we wrap up as a parting message. And please also share your website where people can find more about your work. And like always, I will link everything as well, all your contacts and social medias on my website page as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So, with the whole pandemic that's happening, it's another shift in our consciousness. And what I would encourage people is, think of your life at the moment as a rocket. So it does take a lot of components to put a rocket together. So this time where we've been forced to stop and slow down as a world is about dismantling your rocket and then reassembling it with the things that have worked for you in the past and will work for you toward the future that you now have an opportunity to recreate. And that takes time to assemble your rocket. So that's the first stage. The next stage is to refuel your rocket with the type of fuel that will get you there. So your fuel could be your mindset, could be, the energy you need to put into your body, the people around you, the type of work that you need. And then once you've done that, then, point your rocket toward the life that you really know will fill the joyful spaces and curiosity spaces of your life, and launch. Because we've had enough time, I feel, to put together our rocket. These past 6 months I know a lot of people have been going through a lot of stress and anxiety, and I'm not belittling that at all. But we can now use that to say what hasn't worked in the past, leave that behind. What works, let's refuel our rocket, let's point it in the right direction. It's going to take more energy to lift off, but once we're in orbit, this life is going to be brilliant and it's going to be amazing. And yeah, so let's continue having this discussion. My website is called Design Your Life Foundation as one word.com, and I'm available on other social media platforms with my full name, Barbara Mutedzi, on Instagram and LinkedIn, and then Twitter, B Mutedzi.
Fabulous. And I absolutely love that rocket analogy. I can just see us all taking off as rockets, because, you know, the reality is as well, there is no lack. The universe is infinite abundance. But again, it's all the limits. Yes, there are huge disparities in distribution and hoarding and greed that make it appear like there's a lot of lack in the universe. But the truth is there isn't. And when we launch ourselves and refuel ourselves with those things and, you know, explored and head off, it's powerful. So Barbara, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It was so insightful, so fascinating, and thank you so much for shining your light, and I wish you every success.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much. I really love these conversations, and just in them I continue to heal and grow and also take more people along with me. So totally enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get notified every time a new show is released. Get more information on this week's guest as well on my website, www.soulpowerlight.com.